Hello everybody, this is the Lone Coder and welcome to a new React video. Today's video is going to be about an exciting project that we're going to do where we are going to recreate the classic Connect 4 board game inside of a React app. So we're going to be creating the tokens, we're going to be writing all the logic in order to check if somebody's won, and we're going to end the game. All that stuff we're going to do, but first of all, I want to actually show you the game. So in order to get the code, I'm going to open up Google Chrome, and I have my GitHub account right here. And in my repositories, I have a Connect 4 repository. And you can see all of the files here. You can visit this if you want. This repository is public. So in order to get the code, I'm going to leave the instructions and the links inside of the description, but I'm going to go up here to the address bar and I'm going to copy that link and then open up a terminal, and I'm going to change my directory into a code directory I have just for organizational purposes. And then inside of here, I'm going to write git clone, and then I'm going to paste that link in there with Control-Shift-V. So now I'm going to hit enter and it's going to clone that. Now I'm going to change my directory into that Connect 4 directory. And in order to set up React and everything, there's a lot of packages that need to be installed. And since the package.json file is already in the repository, as you can see, all we need to do is go back to our terminal and write npm install, and that will install all of the required packages. And that's going to take just a moment. So now that that is done, I'm going to clear the console, but also make it a bit bigger so you can see better. And then inside of here, to start the app, I'm going to do npm start, and that will run the React starting script. So now you can see here we have a React app that is styled like a classic Connect 4 board. And at the top you can see here that it says that it is the red player's move. So in order to play this, all you have to do is click anywhere inside of this board, inside of one of the slots anyway, and it will find the bottommost slot that can contain the token and then place it in there. So I'm going to just click somewhere in here, and you can see that we have a red token at the bottom now. I'm going to click in another place, we have a black one. Click on top of it, we have another red one, another black one, and you can see they're stacking like they should be. And so to show you that it actually works, I'm going to purposely make one of them move. So red and black are just going to have a little race here. Now we're at 3, and then when we go to the 4th one on the red side, then we can see it says game over, red wins. And surprisingly, this game is not very complicated to make, and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. We're going to design these tokens very quickly. I'm even going to share the CSS code that makes the board look like this. So I'm actually going to stop the server and change my directory outside of this because we're going to be building this from scratch. So what I'm going to do is inside of this code directory that I have, I'm going to create a new React app. So I'm going to do npx create-react-app, and I'm going to call it Connect 4-YT. And that will create a brand new React app. Okay, so now that is done, so I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to cd into that. It was Connect 4-YT. And now I'm going to open VS Code inside of that directory. So that is open now. I'm going to close these little default pages. So now inside of the source directory, I'm going to create a couple of directories. So I'm going to create a folder called components, and then another folder inside of the source directory called assets, and that will contain our token images. And I'm also going to go to the app.js directory, and I'm going to clear everything from this except for the div in here. And then I'm also going to get rid of this logo import, as well as delete the logo.svg file. So pretty much how this app is going to be structured is inside of the components directory, we're going to have a board.jsx component, as well as a slot.jsx component. And the app.js component is going to import these and use them. The slot component is going to be contained inside of the board, so app.js will not be using slot directly. So let's go ahead and go into the board.jsx file and quickly create this component. So it's going to be const board equals an arrow function. And then inside of here, all we're going to do is return something very simple like a div. And that is going to be all for now. And then same in the slot. Actually, I'm just going to copy everything from here and paste it in there, but rename it to slot. And then we're also going to need to export these. So we're just going to do a default export. That's going to be export default board. So I'm going to copy that line, go to the slot file, and export that as well. Of course, we have to change this from board to slot. And then inside of app.js, I'm going to space down a line and then import the board component. So just to make sure this is working, I'm going to go into this div, and I'm just going to put in an H2 that says Connect 4 app. I almost did. hello world there. It was too tempting. So then I'm going to go back to our terminal and run the app with npm start. Okay, so the app.js component is rendering. Let's make sure the board component is rendering. So we're going to do something similar. In here, we're going to do an h3. And then inside of there, we're just going to put board. And let's do the same for the slot. Inside of here, let's do an h4 that's going to say slot. And we also need to put in the slot component inside of the board component. So let's go up here and import slot. And then down here, let's just render a single slot component. So that'll be slot and then slash angle bracket. Now let's go back to the app, refresh it. Oh, that's right. We did not actually render the board component inside of app.js. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just put in a board component, close that, go back to the app, and now everything should be there. And there it is. So now that that's done, we can start actually working on our app. So we're actually going to deal with the CSS first to make things look right. So first of all, we're actually just going to get rid of everything from this return statement, and all we're going to return from the app component is going to be the board component. And that's all that's going to be inside of the app.js file. So now let's go to the app.css file and start editing that. So I'm actually going to select all of this and just delete it. And actually what we need to do first is go into the board component. And what we're going to do is return a React fragment because we're going to have several different div elements in here. And then inside of here, let's create a div with an ID of board. That way we can select it and edit it with the CSS. So let's go back to the app.css file. And I'm actually going to cheat a little bit on this because the CSS is a little difficult to remember, just like any CSS. So what I'm going to do is put this VS Code window on the side and then pull up my text editor with the original CSS so you can see this. If you like, you can skip forward past this. This is going to be a little bit repetitive. And actually, as a matter of fact, I might just copy all of this to make things easier. And then you can just go to GitHub and copy the exact same file because I guarantee you're not really here for the CSS. So let's just go ahead and copy all of this and paste it in there. And then we can close our text editor, maximize the VS Code window. And you can see here that we're just setting things like the width and the height and the background color and everything. We are doing some flexbox stuff. And then we also have some style set on the slot, which we should probably set right now. So let's go to slot.jsx. And all we're going to do in slot.jsx is add a class name called slot. That way the CSS works. And I think that's all we need to do for now. Let's go ahead and check in the browser to make sure. Oh, it's almost there, not quite, but we'll fix that. Oh, that's right, I was being a little dumb for a second. The problem is that we need to render a bunch of slots in order for this to work. So actually, this is pretty much what it's going to look like, except it does not have the slots yet because those are not rendered. So now let's go ahead and start working on the more important things in our app. So let's go ahead and go to our browser, and what we're going to do is go to figma.com. I think it's .com. There we go. I'm going to log in very quickly. So what we're going to do is go to a new design file, and we're just going to get rid of this. And so what we're going to want to do is make a circle, and that's pretty much it, just a little bit more detail. So what we're going to do is, I don't know how that happened, we're going to go to the frame options, and we're going to create an ellipse, which is the same as a circle. And the size does not matter much because we're going to be exporting it as an SVG. So we can just make this however big we want as long as the width and height are approximately the same. So I'm just going to make this, for example, like 250 by 250. There we go. And then we're going to change the fill color to red. So let's go ahead and edit that. We're just going to drag it over here, and that's done. And then what we're going to do is create another one. And this one's going to be slightly bigger than the first one. And we're also going to want to send this back so that it's behind the red circle. So let's go ahead and go to layers and drag this below. Now that's behind it. So I'm just going to size this maybe like 10 pixels more. So let's try like 260 by 260. Let's see if we can get that. There we go. And let's see how that works. Let's put it behind there. And what we're going to do with that one is make the fill color slightly darker. It almost gives the token a little bit of depth. That's just a small detail that I thought was aesthetically pleasing. So now before we export it, we are going to want to give this icon so we're going to want to create a frame. I'm just going to drag this over our icon, and now we're going to select that. So now I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go to the fill color, open that up, and then drag this little slider here all the way down so that it's transparent. Because you can see if I go all the way up, you can see it's slightly white in the back, but if I drag it down, it's completely invisible. So now we can go ahead and export this entire file. So let's go ahead and export that and we downloaded it. Now we're going to want to do the same thing, but we're going to make this black. So let's change the fill color and make it black, and then go to the background one and make that like a dark gray. So that should be good. Now we're going to export this as well. And then what you're going to want to do is go into your files and then go into your downloads, and then you're going to want to extract both of these. So you can see here inside of there we have the SVG images, so you're going to want to rename it to blacktoken.svg, and then inside of the other one it's going to be redtoken.svg. Now I'm not actually going to use these because I already have them inside of the assets folder, but you're just going to want to drag them into your assets folder right here. And now that that's done, we can go back to our app. So now inside of the slot file, we're going to want to import those two SVG files. So let's go to the Explorer and see what they are called. Oh, that's right, they were in the original. So let's go ahead and go to our files, go to the original one, into the assets. Let's copy these two and copy them. Go back to our code folder, go to connect4yt, source, assets, and paste them in there. Now we have those. So they are called blacktoken and redtoken.svg, just like I said. So at the top of the slot file, I'm going to import them. So that's going to be import redtoken from /assets/redtoken.svg. And then the other one is going to be the same, except we're going to do blacktoken from /assets/blacktoken.svg. Now this slot component is going to take 3 props. The first one is going to be a character prop, because inside of this app, red is going to be signified by a capital X, but then black is going to be signified by a capital O. So in order to get that to work, we need a character prop, and then we're also going to have a Y prop and an X prop in order to track its position inside of the board. So inside of this slot div, we're going to check if the character prop is defined. So if this slot is occupied, then what we're going to do is return some JSX, and that's going to be an image element. And inside of the source, we're going to add some more logic. So if the character is equal to a capital X, then in that case, we're going to want to use the red token as the source. Otherwise, we can just use the black token because we can assume that that's the only other image. And then the width is just going to be 100%, as is the height. So let's add that in. Height equals 100%. Let's close that up. So we will see if this works whenever we get to rendering this inside of the board component. But that's pretty much all for the slot component. So let's go to board now. So first of all, inside of the board component, what we need to do is import the useState function from the React library, or the useState hook, I mean. We're going to have several different states in here. First of all is going to be a state to track the board. So that's going to be board and setBoard equals useState. And then inside of here, we're going to have a 2-dimensional array to keep track of the board. And this board is going to be 6 rows and 7 columns. So in order to do this, we're going to have another array in here. That's an object. We need an array. And we're going to have just empty strings. So it's going to be 7 empty strings. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we're going to add a comma at the end. Then just copy that line and paste it 6 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is the board done. And you may be thinking we could have done this with a nested for loop, but I think this way is more visual and more explicit, so this is the way I prefer. And you can see that none of these are initialized to X or O, which would fill in one of the slots. Then we're going to need a state to keep track of the current player, so we're going to call that current, as in CURR, player, and set current player. And we're going to set that to useState, and we're going to initialize it to capital X, so red goes first. And then we're going to do the same thing, but for the opposite player. So I'm just going to copy this line, paste it, and then just replace that with opposite, except in the latter case we need a capital O there. And then instead of capital X as the initial value, we're going to do a capital O. Finally, we need a game over state. So it's going to be game over, and sorry, I forgot the destructuring syntax, so it's going to be game over, and set game over. And we are going to initialize that to false. Now inside of the return statement, we're going to want to render a bunch of slot components. So what we're going to do is do board.map. That will map over the entire board array. And so it's going to pass into the callback function a row as well as an index. So now we're going to open that up. And then inside of that, because row is an array itself, because it's a 2D array, so each of the map iterations is going to return one of these arrays. What we're going to do is return row.map. And that's going to contain the character, which may be an empty string or maybe a capital X or capital O, and then the other index, which is going to be J. Let's go ahead and open up that function. And what we're going to do is return a slot component. The character prop is going to just be character. The Y prop is going to be I, and the X prop is going to be J. And that will give it the coordinates inside of the array. So now we can go ahead and see if this is rendering all the slots. So let's go back to the browser, and you can see, sure enough, we have a bunch of slots here. This is 7 by 6. So that is working perfectly. So now we can go on to working on the functionality of our app. So first of all, above this board div, what we're going to do is have an H2 that's going to show which player's move it is. So that's going to be an ID of player display for the CSS purposes. So let's make that player display. And then inside of here, we're going to check who the current player is. So if the current player is capital X or red, then we're going to want to return a string that is red. And then if that is not true, then we're going to do black, and then we're going to add move. So to show you what that makes, let's go back to here. You can see that it said red move. So that's just saying that it is the red player's turn. So now let's go back to the code. And we're also going to want to show whenever somebody wins. So above the H2, what we're going to do is add a conditional that if game over is in fact true, then what we're going to do is return in H1. So let's put that in there. And then we're going to check which player won. And in this case, it's going to be the opposite player. So if opposite player equals capital X, then we are going to want to return red. And if not, then we're going to want to return black. And then after that, we're just going to add the text wins. Now above the return statement, what we're going to do is add an event listener for the board components. So we're going to define a function called handleClick, and that is going to take an event parameter. And let's just not do anything inside of it for now. But down here, inside of the board div, what we're going to do is space this out a bit. We're going to add in an onClick attribute, but we only want this click listener to be active if the game is not over. So if the game is over, we won't want the players to add any more moves. So what we're going to do is check if the game is over. If it is, then we're just going to return null so that nothing happens. But if it's not, then we're going to use our handleClick function. So to make sure this is working, let's just do something like console.log board clicked. And I don't know why this is blocking everything, but that's really annoying. So let's go ahead and check that that is working. Let's open up the inspect tools, go to the console and click this, and you can see it says board clicked. So that is working. So let's go back to our code. So inside of the handleClick function, the first thing we're actually going to want to do is get the column number, because when we click on the board, as long as we're not clicking in the yellow here, we are actually clicking a slot component. So in order to access that slot and get its attributes, what we can do is say const column equals e.target.getAttribute, and that attribute is going to be X. And the reason we want the column and not the row is that we may be clicking above the row that we want to be going into. So for example, right now, if I click up here, I don't actually want the token to go in this slot. I actually want it to go down here. So in this case, the row is actually not important. All we want is the column so we can figure out what row it needs to go into. So in order to find the proper row, what we're going to do is define a variable called row. It's going to be equal to board.findIndex. And this takes a callback function. So for each iteration, what it's going to do is pass in another array, because the board array is two-dimensional. So we're going to call it row array. And Jesus, VS Code is being really annoying today. And then the second parameter is going to be the index. So let's go ahead and open that up. So this callback function needs to return a Boolean value based on the value of the parameters. So pretty much what we want to do is find the bottommost slot that that token can go into. So in order to do that, we're going to return this. It's going to be an expression. So we're going to return true if the column in this row, so it's going to be row array with an index of column. We're going to return true if this is not equal to an empty string. In other words, we are going to return true if this space is occupied. But we are also going to return true if this is the bottom slot in the entire board. So that's going to be if the index equals board.length minus 1 because of zero-based indexing. And that is also, now we should have the correct row and column to put our token in. But in practice, this actually causes some bugs. So what we're going to want to do is go down a couple lines and then check if the row is not the bottommost row in the board. So if row does not equal board.length -1, then what we're going to want to do is decrement the row by 1. So it's going to be row minus equals 1. But then also, if the board at that row and at that column is currently occupied, so if it does not equal an empty string, then we are also going to want to decrement that row by 1. Now, this is all we can do for now inside of this handle click function because there are some more functions that we need to define. So let's go ahead and do that up here. So we're going to define a function called update board, and eventually this function is going to return a Boolean value based on whether somebody won or not, so that we can set the game over state. But for now, it's not going to return anything. We're just going to update the board. So this function is going to take 3 parameters. It's going to be the row, the column, and the character that we want to put in that slot. So we are going to run the set board function that we use to update the board state. And we are going to take the previous value of that and pass it to our callback. First of all, we're going to want to make a copy of that board that we can edit. So it's going to be board copy equals an array, and we're just going to use the spread syntax to spread in that previous array. And we are going to update this board copy. We're going to make the location at that row and that column to be the character that's passed into the function. So for example, if we update this array with a row value of 2 and a column value of 3 and a character value of capital X, then what did I say, row value of 2, that would be the second row, so it would be 0, 1, 2. And the third column would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So in here, we would put in a capital X. So that's pretty much what's going to happen in this code, just for better understanding. And then we're going to return that board copy so that it updates the state. And then, like I said, this is going to end up returning a Boolean value that is returned by another function. But for now, let's just go ahead and return nothing. But I will add in a comment so that we don't forget. So let's go here and write, don't forget to return. And by win value, I mean the value that determines whether somebody has won or not. And in order to do this, we need another function. And we're just going to call this one check win. So let's do const check win, and that's going to be another arrow function. And just like the update board function, it's going to take in the row, the column, and the character. So let's go ahead and open this one up. So inside of here, we're going to have some kind of repetitive code in order to check if the current player has won. So we're going to be following a basic pattern here where we check if the board at that row and that column is equal to the character. And this in itself will not work. So what we're going to want to do for the first iteration, for example, is going to be checking if the row plus 1 at that column is equal to that character. So for a better example, let's go ahead and go up to our array and say the row and column is right here. So let's put a capital X here. When we're checking if the row plus 1 at that column is equal to that character, we are checking if this row contains that character, because row plus 1 would be actually 1 row down. And so if this were X, for example, and we are checking if this slot plus 1 row is equal to the character, in this case it would return true, but if it was empty or if it was capital O, it would return false. So I hope that makes sense. This is going to be the basic pattern we're going to be following. So pretty much our goal is to check if there are 4 identical characters in a row in all directions. So for example, if we have an X here and another X here and then another one and another one, then in this case we want to win because we have this one, and then we're going to check the one below that, and then the one below that one, and then the one below that one. Or if it was also in this direction, so X, 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 and X, then we would also want to end the game, because in this case we're going to check if this one is X, and that will be true. So then we're going to check this one and then this one. So I hope this is starting to make sense and that you are starting to see the pattern. But if not, just hang on and we will go through this step by step. So in this case, if there's another X or O, whichever one is passed into the character parameter, if there is another identical character there, then we're going to want to do another if statement. But in this case, we're going to be checking that same column, but we're going to be doing row plus 2. And like I said, that same column. So then we're going to do the same thing if it equals the character. And then inside of that, we're going to do the exact same thing again, but we are going to do row plus 3. So let's go ahead and change that. So if that's the case, we are going to return true, because that means one of the players won. Now keep in mind, this is only working for one direction. This is only going down. We also need to go left and right. And there's also one problem with this. Imagine, for example, we place a token in, and it lands at the bottom slot. If we try to go down a row, so that's going to be row +1, there is actually no array there, and we are going to get some errors because that index in the array just simply does not exist. So what we're going to do is actually wrap this in a try block. So we're going to open that up, copy this, and then paste it into the try block. And that will prevent us from getting errors as long as we put in our catch block as well. So it's going to be catch E. And if we catch an error, all we're going to do is just console.log the error. And pretty much all we're going to do is just copy this and edit it over and over again. So let's go ahead and paste that in there. But this time what we're going to do is check diagonally. So if there's an X here, we want to check this way. And in order to do that, all we need to do is go to the column and add by the same numbers that we're adding to the row. So column +1, column +2, and finally column +3. Now we're going to check the opposite diagonal direction. So if we have a character here, we're going to check this way. So in order to do that, let's just go ahead and copy this again, go down a couple lines and paste it. But this time we're going to do column -1, but leave the row the exact same. So column -1, -2, and -3. Next, we are going to check to the right direction. So copy it again, go ahead and paste it. And for this one, all you need to do is get rid of the addition to the row. So it's going to be the same row, but we're going to increment, or not increment, add to the column. So let's get rid of the minus signs. So that will check to the right direction to see if the player won. So again, copy it, go down, paste. And this time we're going to check to the left. So all you need to do is replace these plus signs with minus signs. And for the next one, we're going to check to the upper left. And in order to do that, we need to do row -1 and column -1. So then we'll do row -2 and row -3. And then the last one is going to be the upper left. So again, copy, paste, and to do the upper left, we're going to do the opposite of the column. We're going to go to the right, which would be +1, +2, and +3. So now that function is finished. We have an algorithm that checks if a player won, and it seems a little long, but it's actually not that bad. I'm just going to minimize it so this file isn't so long. And down here, we had written, don't forget to return the win value. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's return the value of the check win function. So let's check win for the same row, same column, and the same character that we got from the handle click function. And as a matter of fact, we actually haven't called this yet, so let's do that in the handle click function. So you can see here that the update board function returns the value of the check win function, which is a Boolean value. So the update board function will also return a Boolean value, either true or false. So what we're going to do is set the game over state. So down here inside of the handle click function, we're going to do set game over, and we're going to return the value of updating the board with the row, the column, and the character. And then finally, down here, if the game is not over, so if nobody won, then there's a few things we're going to want to do. Pretty much we're just going to swap the players, so the current player is going to be reversed with the opposite player. So if the current player is X, we want it to be O, and then the opposite player is going to be X. So to do a swap, first of all, we're going to make a copy of the current player. So let's do current player copy equals current player. And then we're going to set the current player to the opposite player value, and then set the opposite player value to the current player copy. And then down here, we can see we have already added the event listener, so this should work so far. Except for one big problem in the handle click function. The mistake I made is that the ch variable, or the character variable, is actually not defined. So what we're actually going to want to do is inside of the handle click function, the value of the character is actually going to be the current player. And now if we go to the browser, this just might work. So let's go ahead and let's test it. So I'm going to click here, and it compiled with problems. Let's see what's wrong. And it's saying we made an assignment to a constant variable. So somewhere in there we should have used let, and we used const. Let's go ahead and find it. That's right, here on the row, this needs to be let, because as you can see down here, we are doing row minus equals 1. And one last thing I have just realized is that inside of the slot component, we actually have to use these x and y values. It slipped my mind for some reason. So let's set the x attribute to be x and the y attribute to be y. And now finally, let's go to the browser and see if this is working so we can see our board. I'm going to refresh it just in case. And now if I click up here, you can see that a token was placed at the bottom. So that is working. And so you can see up here, it says black move. So I'm going to click in another place and I'm going to click here and we can see they're stacking. But we also need to check if the winning algorithm is working. So let's go ahead and just stack them next to each other. So now you can see they're both 3 and I'm going to make red move and it says red wins. So this is great news. Our Connect 4 app is actually working. So there's just one thing I want to leave you with, and this is going to be an exercise. So I want you to notice that there's a few cases in which we actually don't win when technically we should, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to place a token here, and then a black one here, a red one here, another black one, and then a red one, and a black one. So what I want you to notice is down here in the red token area, we can see we have a missing slot. But if there was a token there, this would be 4 in a row and we should win, right? Well, we actually don't, so I'll show you. If I place it there, we actually don't win, even though we have 4 in a row. And the reason for this is because how we set up our algorithm, when we placed in that last token, it's going to check to the left, to the right, down, and in all diagonal directions. So when it goes to the left, it's going to be counting 1, 2, 3, so that's not 4 in a row. It's going to count to the right, which is going to be 1, 2, that's going to be 2 in a row. Everywhere else is just going to be 1 in a row. So the algorithm is actually not detecting that we're winning when technically we should. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of hints on how to do this. Pretty much what you want to do when you update the board, you're going to want to check every single slot to see if there is a token in it, and then use the check win algorithm on all of those tokens. So even though we placed a token just in this slot, you're actually going to want to also check this token right here to see if we won from this direction. So in this case, we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we would win. Because as it is, all we're doing is using the algorithm on the token that was currently placed in this move, but we're actually going to want to check the entire board for wins. And I actually already have a solution of sorts online that you can check for reference. It is not in JavaScript, it is actually in C#. But if you know JavaScript, you should understand the code pretty well. So I will leave the link in the description. I'll show you it right now. So I'm going to go to the original version and go back to the board. And I'm going to copy this link right here and paste that in the browser. It's on a site called .NET Fiddle. It is a online C# compiler. And so the part that I want you to pay attention to is right here. So if I do the same exact thing, I'm going to place a token in column 1. And I wonder if I can make this any bigger. There we go. And then I'm going to place an O in the last column, then column 2, back to 7, and then 4 and 7 again. So you can see we have the same setup if you imagine X to be red and O to be black. So right here we have a gap, and if I place a token in that gap, so that'll be column 3, you can see that it says game over because X actually won. So the algorithm is actually done here. I'm going to shrink this back down, and I'm going to show you where you can find it. It's going to be on line 128. So you can see if you go to line 128, it's going to be a function called check win. And here we have a character variable called X or O, which is the equivalent of the CH variable we used in the React version. So this is the function that you're going to want to check to find the solution, and I'll give you a couple of hints. If you look in here, we have pretty much the same algorithm. If you look in here, we have a try block where we are checking the row +1 and then the column, except they are called I and J in this. And then again, we are catching the error. In this case, it's an index out of range exception. And we're just doing the same thing. And the only real difference is that it's wrapped inside of other blocks. We have a for loop, another for loop, and an if statement. And in this program, instead of board, we have a grid variable. And instead of .length, we have to use get length for a 2-dimensional array. So get length with a value of 0 will return the rows, and 1 will return the columns. So pretty much we are just checking the entire 2-dimensional array for wins. And so that's what I want you to do inside of our React version. If you can figure this out, then bravo to you, I congratulate you, and in any case, I congratulate you on following me through this tutorial and developing this app. I hope you found it exciting. I certainly did, especially when I was developing it in the first place. So again, congratulations. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. I'm a fairly new channel, still starting to get on my feet in the world of YouTube. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it helped you become more skilled at React. And so with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.